Okay, I'm sorry about that. Ross Dellenger is with us, Yahoo Sports. Ross, have you ever in your life thought that you would write basically a story a day about news, breaking news, and new things going on in college athletics like the last several months?
Not quite. It's been quite busy the last few weeks. I tell people it's the house case and the new model. All of it is, trying to figure it out and answer these questions has been like putting a puzzle together while you're drinking heavily and juggling knives.
Ross, you were on the call today, like I was, with the Big 12, and Brett Yormark opened by saying we're open for business. A lot of people tweeted that out. A lot of people thought that meant expansion, and then as soon as he was asked about it, he said no. On that, is he maybe more pushing that as their mantra, as opposed to that means, hey, I would like NC State to come here?
Well, I think there may be some semantics to involve, right? I mean, he said they're not actively, I think, looking for expansion targets, but he's always looking to grow, I think, in a way, whether that's teams or revenue. I think they're always looking in the Big 12 and to grow and expand in a variety of ways. So I think that's probably more so what he is referring to. There's a difference between, I guess, actively out there, right, trying to poach teams and stuff, like kind of was the case last year with the Pac-12, than just kind of, hey, our door's open, we're working to find other way, any way we can to grow the league from a revenue perspective and a brand perspective. He's always kind of he's always in that mode, it seems.
Ross, private equity got brought up, and I know that's a buzz term right now in college athletics, and a lot of just speculation on what that could possibly mean. I know you've written about it, but any surprise to hear his stance on it, which was very open and not at all the negative connotations that seem to follow that term in other areas?
No, I'm not surprised. I think, I talked to enough folks in the private equity capital world that, Brett Yormark is, I think he has held discussions with those people about his league. And again, I think he's always looking, right, to grow revenue in some way and always look to improve the conference. And part of that is opening yourself up to everything and trying to go down every avenue. And I think that's an avenue that he's at least looked at, just like a lot of the ADs in the country have. So not real surprised. He kind of comes from that world, right, that outside of college athletics world where the private capital, private equity concepts are quite popular.
Ross, if anything was to derail, if anything can, the settlement, is the Title IX uncertainty or what will be done with it or what happens with it or how anyone reacts to it, is that the one that might be the biggest issue?
Well, I think that Title IX is the biggest issue in answering the question of how teams are going to distribute revenue. If it has to be split with 50-50 men and women athletes, or can it be split based on value, an athlete's value to a department? We all know that about in between 80 and 90%, I think, of athletic departments are the revenue they produce. About 80 to 90% of the revenue they produce are generated by football and men's basketball. I think enough studies have been done on that to know that's the case, at least in the major conferences. And so should that mean that 80 or 90% of the revenue go to football and men's basketball? Some believe that's the case, but that would violate Title IX. So do you satisfy Title IX? And if you satisfy Title IX, then that may mean you have lawsuits from football players who believe they're not getting enough of the revenue that they generate. So it's a real issue in determining how athletic departments share this revenue, and it's kind of one of those damn if you do, damn if you don't situations. Because if you split the revenue evenly and you satisfy Title IX, but might trigger more litigation from the likes of football players and continue the existence of collectives to subsidize football players and men's basketball players. And if you share the revenue unequally, then you not only risk, but you almost guarantee Title IX lawsuits.
Ross, one of the things that was brought up today on the call was new revenue streams. The thing you reported on from SEC meetings was logos on the field and things like that. I would assume, just knowing that they're going to have to start pulling out all the stops, that would get ratified across most conferences pretty fast. Do you think that once the maybe old school presidents kind of get past that we'll start seeing more and more of those things around college athletics?
I think so. I think you'll probably see next week, or maybe later this month. There's a meeting next week of the NCAA Rules Committee, and there's that is on the agenda to be discussed. I don't know if they'll vote actually. Maybe they'll wait, but I think most administrators are expecting this fall, as soon as this fall, and certainly by next season, that they'll be able to put corporate sponsored logos on the field. And that's another, it's just another untapped revenue source within athletic departments that you're going to see tapped over the next few years because of the increasing expenses and specifically the fact that they'll have to come up with an extra 20, 25, maybe even as much as $30 million when you add in additional scholarships. Because, of course, part of this is the elimination of scholarship limits and the institution of roster limits instead. But schools will be able to expand their scholarships across the full roster. So you're going to have scholarship money. You're going to have increases in scholarship money. You're going to have increases in the athlete compensation. Salaries don't seem to be going down. So you have all these expenses, and you're going to have to pay for them. And so one of the ways to do that is certainly putting more corporate sponsorships on a variety of things, whether it's the field or even a player's jersey.
Ross Dellenger, Yahoo Sports. If you don't follow him on Twitter, you're missing out. It's a constant churn of information and a lot of great sources that he has. How would you describe Greg Sankey's true mission statement or end game? And is he now the most powerful person in college athletics?
I think that I think of anyone, Greg Sankey probably does have more authority and influence than anyone else in college athletics. I think he understands the inner workings of the NCAA process and legislative process. And, he presides over a group of schools that basically generate more revenue and are more successful in the high revenue producing sports than any other league. And that certainly makes him a powerful figure. But I think unlike some of the others, like, Brett Yormark or even Tony Petitti, he is from within college athletics and is a lifelong college athletics administrator. And I think that he does, to an extent, want to preserve the, national competition in broad-based sports and college athletics. And so there's a little bit of a balancing act that I think he's taking right now, which is the necessary need for change within Division I and in FBS in general. His schools are generating so much revenue that they have become virtually a business, and it's time to pay the employees of that business that generate that money, and that's the athletes. But at the same time, I think he wants to preserve the NCAA basketball tournament in national competition in general, in the NCAA in general.
Ross, one of the things that stood out to me is every time we hear administrators talk about the House versus NCAA settlement and all these things, there are so many things they don't know. Do they even relatively have a timeline of when they will start to know these things?
Yeah, I think it's in steps and stages. I think the first step was exactly what's happened already, which is an agreement to a short form settlement. The short form settlement agreement is probably around, I believe it's around like 18, 20, 22 pages, something like that. And there's an agreement there. So that's step one. Step two is then creating a long form settlement agreement, which is probably over 100, will probably be over 100 pages. That's going on right now. And that will be filed probably within 45 days, I believe, is the timeline for the court deadline that they'll need to meet. So by the end of June, I would think that we would know. Certainly by mid-July, we'll have that long form. And then that has to be approved by a judge. And then after that, there's a 3-month window where plaintiffs can object, and then you have hearings. So the settlement won't be finalized until well into the fall, winter, and maybe even early next year. And while all that's going on, under the impression that the settlement will eventually be finalized, you'll have college athletic administrators like Greg Sankey, like Tony Petitti, Brett Yormark, Jim Phillips, mainly those 4 conference commissioners, in finalizing details around a new model and things like scholarships and roster limits and all that stuff that comes with this new model, and a new enforcement arm that polices the salary caps. All of that will be done over probably the next 6, 8, 10 months.
Ross, last thing. The media days are not far away. You know that. Big 12 in Vegas, I think it's the 8th, 9th, or 10th of July. And then there's the SEC. And when do you get a chance to get away from it all? Is that going to happen this year for you?
Probably not. I am back home on the Gulf Coast where I'm from, and I'm about to have a crab boil tonight and a crawfish boil tomorrow. So for a little while, I'm going to try to get away.
There you go. I see where you have those pictures of those on your site at times, and also I mentioned on your Twitter feed. Hey, man, we appreciate you. Hardest working guy, I think, in covering college athletics, along with a lot of other great national writers, but Ross is at the top. Ross Dellenger, Yahoo Sports. Ross, have a great weekend. Thank you very much for your time.
All right, guys.
And we go from Ross, and coming up next,